You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
And there may be a storm brewing in D.C. There is definitely a storm brewing in the Caribbean. Apparently, there's a record-breaking Hurricane Beryl that is intensifying as it churns through the Caribbean south of Grenada. It has regained Category 4 strength after briefly weakening. We're talking top winds of 130 miles per hour. Well, Matthew Palazola is a senior analyst and P&C insurance over at Bloomberg Intelligence, and he joins us now. Now, Matthew, I know you look at the stuff through the lens of insurers, but can you just give us some perspective of how you're looking at this storm?
Yeah, so for perspective, as you had said, the earliest Category 4 in the Atlantic since 2005. And 2005 was one of the worst hurricane seasons on record.
Was that Katrina?
Katrina was one of those storms in that year. So right now it's early. We're looking at it. It seems to be I always look at it, is it going to impact the United States, right? The islands obviously matter, but generally for global insured losses, something on Florida or, in Texas, Louisiana, those are the kind of big money loss events. What it looks like is going to happen here is it will probably hit the Yucatan Peninsula. It will probably cross a lot of the islands in the Caribbean south of the Greater Antilles. But so we're looking at that, and we're looking at past events in Mexico. In 2005, there was also Wilma hit Mexico and caused almost $8 billion in economic losses. The insured were a lot less. I do think Beryl's going to slow down, though, so it probably wouldn't be that bad.
What's it tell you, or what is it the insurance company's telling you about kind of how they view hurricanes, other extreme events thing? It's always in the news here, extreme heat, extreme storms, extreme. What do the insurance companies say? Because they're the ones that actually have money at stake here.
Skin in the game on it.
Skin in the game.
So what they will say is climate change is having an impact. You wouldn't directly blame all these things on climate change. It's very hard to exactly say. One of the good things about the global industry, though, is that it reprices on an annual basis, right? Generally, all these policies are written every year. So they can reprice things as they go along. They could leave regions as they go along. You are hearing these record-breaking things. Even last year, which turned out to be a mild hurricane season, there was a bunch of activity earlier in the season.
So based on that, what the areas in the U.S., for example, that are exposed to these kind of intense changing storms, are insurers still insuring houses there? Like, are they still doing the job, or has all the stuff changed? That was a really intelligent question. Are they doing the stuff, or have the stuff changed?
Some stuff has changed, some stuff hasn't.
There we go.
The insurers are leaving certain areas, mostly California, honestly. The Florida market.
Interesting. Is that wildfires? Because
yes, wildfires, and the regulation is tough in some of these states too. So what you saw in Florida was a litigious environment that was driving up a lot of costs, and insurers and reinsurers pulled out of there. The state has done a lot of things to address that. So you see insurance companies actually tending to start to go back.
Didn't Warren Buffett go back?
So Buffett, Berkshire's reinsurance unit had a big bet on Florida last year. We don't actually know. They disclosed it at the annual meeting last year. They didn't talk about it this year necessarily. So we don't exactly know if they're there. I would suspect they probably are, but I can't confirm.
Okay. So, but if I want to go out and buy a condo down in Florida on the coast, can I get that insured?
You can. What is happening, you probably won't get it insured.
Doing it, by the way,
in case you're wondering. You can. It will probably be through a Florida company, like a smaller insurance company. You're probably not going to get, you might get an Allstate, I don't know. But you're not going to get one of these probably national name brands. You'll probably get a smaller company. You're definitely going to pay a high price. You may even get it through the state fund. So Alex, to your other question before, one of the things that is happening is that there's an insurer of last resort in a lot of these states. So it's essentially the state insurance company. It's not. It's an insurance company, so it's not like just backed by taxpayer money. It's supposed to be self-sufficient, but it can always rely on the state. So a lot of people will end up getting insured through those mechanisms.
What about reinsurance?
So the reinsurance market really, I think, is returning to Florida. So these things that were hurting it it's kind of a wait and see. The prices went up a lot, especially for catastrophe-prone regions, stuff like Florida. So it became, to Paul's point earlier, it became attractive to some companies like Berkshire Hathaway to get back into these markets.
How are these property and casualty stocks trading? Are they trading on the fundamentals of each company? Or are they trading on, or do they typically trade on interest rates? How do they trade?
So the P&C companies trade less on interest rates than life insurance companies. The life insurance companies are way more levered, assets to equity. They have bigger portfolios. These names, they'll tend to move on the pricing in the cycle, sometimes the weather. Interest rates will help. They're kind of in line with the market this year. Some have done better, so the auto insurance companies are doing a little bit better. We probably talked about that in the past, but they were having huge increase in loss costs, so cars were more expensive to fix, and that is kind of abating a bit, so those names have done better.
What about rates? So Fed cuts, interest rates, how does that affect the insurance market? And does it matter as much, considering that some of these places are going to get hit no matter what because of all the changing weather?
So it won't matter on the underwriting side much. Potentially it could, in that interest rates they help investment income, which could subsidize underwriting. But realistically, lower interest rates will hurt investment income. Depending on how low they go, maybe not dramatically. It probably does not change underwriting decisions, though. But net, lower rates are a bad thing for these companies.
All right, if I'm buying property and casualty insurance stocks, what kind of dividend yields am I getting on these things?
They're not dramatically high. I mean, they're probably less than what you'd get on the S&P. I mean, it's 2 or 3%.
Yep.
I don't think they love to be locked into returning capital, so they'll favor share repurchase instead.
And are they doing that?
Yeah, I mean, they're buying back shares. They'll tend to pause during hurricane season. This is by some estimates, quote, the hurricane season from hell coming up.
Oh, great.
That was a headline. I don't know if it was clickbait or not, but it was a headline. So you may see the second, third quarter repurchase slow down, but that's usually the main mechanism.
What about consolidation in this industry? You mentioned some smaller players, say in Florida. Mm-hmm. What does that wind up looking like?
I don't think you're going to see big consolidation in the industry. So there's a completely separate issue with liability loss reserves, where they write these policies, and then many years later they may have claims on them, and that is starting to rear its head in terms of we didn't get maybe great pricing years ago. So I think it's going to be a headwind to large consolidation. You may see it on the smaller side, companies that I don't necessarily even cover, like those maybe smaller Florida names might get scooped up. There are companies that are starting up and taking policies out of the state fund. Which is not necessarily consolidation, but it's kind of helping, and that's a business. But when they get whacked by a hurricane, we'll see how those companies do.
What's the best idea in insurance these days? What do people want to talk about the most?
I mean, the reinsurance story seems to have played out a little bit. The reserves are an issue. Climate change is an issue. Cyber insurance is a kind of big issue. You've seen this now with the auto dealers, right? Some estimates say it could be the biggest line of insurance eventually. What the insurance companies have done historically is kept limits very low on this. So even in a big event, they're only paying out a small amount. But some would say it's actually an uninsurable risk, that it's completely correlated. So they want to stay away from things that could affect a huge group, like a flood that could flood a state or something like that. This is something that could shut down, swaths of the country. So they want to stay away from it.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Matthew Palazola of Bloomberg Intelligence. He covers everything insurance and reinsurance, and then by de facto, you're like a storm analyst, and does the weather for us as well. So we do appreciate that. But that's kind of scary, right? Like already a Category 4 storm, and it's only, what is it, beginning of July?
I was looking at the map, yeah. Matt's got a great, the map from the one of those mapping people that go out there, and it's cutting right across the Caribbean, right across the ocean, hitting the Mexican peninsula, so that could be harsh for our good friends in like Cancun, things like that.
Yikes. Yeah, it doesn't look very good there.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
We ate busy 24 hours for Boeing. The U.S. Justice Department plans to charge Boeing with criminal fraud after finding the company violated a 2021 deferred prosecution agreement tied to 2 previous fatal crashes. And Bloomberg News was reporting that late yesterday. And then just hours later, Boeing announced a plan to buy back Spirit AeroSystems. As Charlie was just reporting, a supplier that it had spun off 2 decades ago. They're going to pay $4.7 billion in a bid to improve manufacturing. Stock today up about 2.5%, but down about 28% year to date. So let's get the latest on what's happening at Boeing. Very busy over there with George Ferguson. He covers the airlines. He covers the aerospace companies for Bloomberg Intelligence. George, how do you put into context what's happened to Boeing over these last several years? Where does the company go from here?
So I guess the way I put it in context would be a lot of air outsourcing at Boeing, including Spirit AeroSystems, a couple of decades ago. 787 was one of these watershed events where they were trying to outsource large portions of the manufacture and even engineering is probably the better term than design, engineering on that airplane. And now I think the company in the midst of pulling some of that supplier base back in so they can control quality and improve production output. So I think that's where they are, and the weekend's events are, I think, all steps on the path to improving production, eliminating distractions, improving quality. There's more to come, more to do, and they need a strong recovery in the second half. They can't burn cash like they've been burning. But that's what I would say. Kind of where we are right now is we're in the process of cleaning that whole outsourcing mess up.
So as it relates to the fraud charges, etc., do they have to pay a boatload of money to people on this, or can they spend a boatload of money instead on making sure that their programs are good and their quality control is good?
So I'm going to first, caveat this whole thing with I'm not an attorney, so that we're in some realms there that I don't totally understand, but I believe it's something $400 or $500 million worth of fines they'd have to pay if they agree to the current Justice Department proposal, and they'd have to bring in an outside, sort of quality manager, overseer. I think that they have some rights to, sort of negotiate over who that would be. So to me, that doesn't sound like in extremely onerous provisions. I think it's something that, again, they got to get out of their way to start to build more aircraft and focus on improving their processes, their production processes. So to me, it doesn't sound bad. I don't know what the other sort of legal ramifications are here on that.
How many planes are they building per month now, George, and where do they need to get to?
So I don't know that we know, right? It looks like the second quarter is going to have less deliveries than the first quarter. We still have to see what the June deliveries were, but through May, it was they were on a lower trajectory than they were in 1Q. I suspect, again, things like managing quality down at Spirit are slowing things down. The negotiations with Spirit have been slowing things down. The discussion with the FAA about the way forward and the processes to make sure the quality is higher has been slowing things down. And we don't know how many of whatever they delivered in 2Q was delivered out of the inventory that they already built, right? They want to get rid of that inventory, which is, I think really onerous on efficiency, because they need folks to maintain airplanes that are already built and sitting in the desert. But so either way, we kind of think 2Q is going to be below 1Q, a rough quarter, probably a $4 billion plus cash use after any sort of maintenance capex. So I think the full story here really is 3Q and 4Q this year. They just can't keep burning $4 billion of cash per quarter. And so again, I think you see the fury of activity as we enter the beginning of summer at Boeing, and I think it's all about tidying up these issues they need to tidy so they can get at building and delivering a lot more airplanes in the second half and lowering cash burn significantly.
Just going to the Spirit thing for a moment. So Airbus is going to be taking over parts of Spirit that make components for its own aircraft. How does that work? Does that make it like a separate company within Airbus, or is it totally going to be absorbed by Airbus? What does that look like?
So, I mean, the press release I saw today made me believe that it's going to be fully taken out of Spirit AeroSystems, at least large portions of it, and pulled into Airbus. I thought much more interesting too in that whole disclosure was Airbus is getting paid, like I think it was $559 million, something just over $500 million to take those businesses, to take the businesses and take the assets. So we knew that that was a drag on Spirit, and it seems like maybe a pretty significant drag. Again, I think something that really helps potentially improve Boeing quality and throughput is a management team not focused on trying to economize, especially on a big loss-making contracts like the Airbus contracts.
Hey, George, if Boeing doesn't have enough balls in the air, they also now need to find a new CEO because Chief Executive Officer David Calhoun, he said he's going to step down by year end at the latest. Who's going to take this job?
Oh, that's George's favorite question.
This is a hard job to take, and they would love to have someone in place, I think, to manage these problems and the upcoming ones. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation in the marketplace. I'd be throwing darts at a dartboard. I just know it needs to be a good manufacturing person. Someone focused on manufacturing shop floor kind of quality. I will tell you, we're going to step from these two problems they're going to go on to simmer, right? Spirit doesn't get purchased until sometime next year. There's a lot of details to get worked out between now and then. DOJ's, they may agree. They're trying to negotiate with them. They could decide not to agree and end up in a lawsuit. And I'll tell you that as we get into September, one of Boeing's most important unions will come to the table. That's when their contract expires. And so so the hits just keep on coming here, I think. And that will be another very interesting challenge because I think those workers probably get some very nice increases. If you get into a strike, that second half recovery at Boeing is really put into question because you can't make airplanes with your most important union striking. And again, they're going to want some good pay raises.
All right, George, good stuff. Boy, it's like a full-time job just figuring out what's going on with Boeing. But boy, that's one of those companies you feel like too big to fail in so many different ways.
Totally.
But need to really turn things around. George Ferguson, he covers all things airlines, aerospace for Bloomberg Intelligence.
This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.